Hi, I'm Kayla. I'm Peach's virtual assistant. Back when I had a spending problem, it wasn't uncommon for me to walk away with 4 pairs of shoes put on my credit card. But today I've got it under control and I'm credit card debt free like a boss. Now, check this out.
Short answer is more money. That's why I said, even if you're debt free, some people say, well, why the heck would they do that? They could just sell it. Right. But they're going to pay more money. So the reason we can get them full price typically, if they're not asking some crazy number, is we also get the benefit of principal pay down while we're doing this deal. So you as a homeowner, you don't have a realtor commission, and I have nothing against realtors, I was one. You don't have, in some cases, even have to pay your transfer tax, which in most states, that's on the seller's side of the expenses. So more money is the short answer. So there's only one person this doesn't work for. If you, the homeowner, need or want your cash now, even if it was less, I'm not a fit. Every other scenario, I'm a fit because I can get them more money.
Alrighty, everyone, this is the Money Peach Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Peach, and I'm going to be bringing on some of the most amazing people I can find so they can tell you how they do their life and their money the right way. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. Today's guest on the show today is Chris Prefontaine. He is a real estate investor and the founder of the smartrealestatecoach.com and host of the Smart Real Estate Coach podcast. Now, I'm excited to have Chris come on the show today because he is going to walk us step by step. And when I mean step by step, I make sure he breaks it down. He's going to show us how to do a lease to own as an investor in the real estate world. And the thing I like about lease to owns is it allows you 3 things. It allows you money on the transaction, it creates passive income over time, and then there is a sell component where you have a third payday on the back end. Now, we're going to walk through all 3 ways, but my favorite thing about this is looking at all the different ways to generate income in real estate. I will say that this has the least amount of risk involved so far that I've heard about. So without further ado, let me bring on Chris Prefontaine, founder of the smartrealestatecoach.com. Here we go. Alrighty, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I got Chris Prefontaine, and he is the founder of the smartrealestatecoach.com. So Chris, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Pleasure.
So when I first heard about you, Chris, we've had a couple different real estate investors come on and teach us a lot of great things, but no one's ever come on the show talking about like a lease to own option. I didn't want to have a repeat. I wanted to have something brand new for our listeners. And when I came across you, I thought this is going to be perfect. You're a fellow podcaster. You've been featured on some of the top podcasts in the world. And you've been doing this a long time in real estate. I was excited to have you come on the show, not just for our listeners, but selfishly, I want to learn as much as I can too, because I'm also dabbling in the world of real estate. So thank you for coming on the show. But before we jump into real estate investing, let our listeners know, where are you calling in from?
Yeah, I'm sitting now in Newport, Rhode Island. I wish I could tell you it's gorgeous out, but it's downpouring. And I'm at my office and I work with my family, my kids. So we're all here today.
Okay, so you're in Rhode Island, and it's funny, you say it's downpouring. I'm in Phoenix, and we get like a downpour about 2 days a year, so I don't even know what that means. Did you grow up then on the northeast side of the country?
Yeah, I actually grew up, I met my wife when we were 11 years old in Massachusetts, Auburn, and then we brought the kids up in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, and came down here to Newport, which is just vacation land for a lot of people, in 2004.
Okay, and then when you say that you have like a family-run business where your kids are involved, how many kids do you have?
2 and my son-in-law. So my son-in-law, Zach, my son, Nick, and my daughter, Kayla.
And you guys are all in the business together?
Yep, every day.
Oh, very cool. You've been in real estate quite a long time, correct?
I'm going to date myself, but 26 years, going on 27.
So early 90s is when you got started.
Exactly.
So how did you get started in the early 90s in real estate? Because that was a totally different time. I mean, this was in the land of higher interest rates. You know, things were moving a lot differently as they are today. So how did you stumble upon real estate?
Yeah, this one might surprise you and or your listeners. I grew up in a family company having zero to do with real estate, and I was traveling one day to our branches all over New England. My father owned it, and I heard an old Earl Nightingale tape. I'm sure you remember Earl. And Earl talked about some guy during the Depression that would go around and talk to landowners and stick a sign in their yard and flip their lots, basically, to make a long story short. So I literally, that weekend, dated myself again, but got a voice recorder for the phone in my basement and put it on a stool and started talking to landowners and putting signs in their yard to pre-sell a finished home We would actually not pay for the lot till the home was built. We would pre-sell the home. We would not pay the subcontractors till the home was built. Everyone was on the same team to get that thing to close. And we did, a couple hundred homes probably in the early 90s. And then we got beat up after doing a subdivision, got a little bit too cocky and big for our britches and took on a subdivision, took a little bit of a bath, loved the business still, so bought a Realty Executives franchise. So I then became a broker owner. I never was a realtor before. Built that with one intention, and that was to sell it in 5 years. And I didn't know how, because everybody told me you couldn't do that. If you're a broker, you can't. There's nothing to sell. I ended up selling to a Coldwell Banker in 2000, so that was a great experience, unlike the end of the building experience there. And then from then on, I've coached people in some capacity. So back then it was United States and Canada, and it was $1 million and up typical realtors that were high producing. And at the same time, I was working my own investments, condominium conversions, multifamily to condos. That's bringing you all the way up to like before the debacle of 08.
So kind of going back then, you started in the early 90s. Were you more on the contracting side of real estate?
Yeah, it was myself and a gentleman that knew the field, my partner, because I didn't know how to build a house to save my life. I knew how to generate the land lead. So we were acting as builders. We would pre-sell the home, meet with the buyers, pre-sell the home, and then he'd build it. I'm in the office doing financing and whatnot. He'd build it. And then they'd get an end loan, the buyers, and we'd cash out the landowner and all the subs and keep the difference.
Gotcha. And so as you were growing this, you said that you got into a subdivision. The reason why is I love to hear the success stories, but I think with every success story, I like hearing about overcoming some kind of heartache. I think every entrepreneur out there, or anybody listening, you have to understand that it is tough, whether you're an investor, whether you're taking on any kind of risk, whether you're thinking about leaving your job to start your own business. It is tough. And so you were saying you took a bath in a subdivision. What does that mean?
So when we were building prior to the subdivision, it was just single lots. We called it spot building, right? So there'd be a neighborhood, there'd be an empty lot sitting there. Everybody's driven by homes. All of a sudden, you see this empty lot. That's where we would build, and we'd only do it when we could pre-sell it. So instead, we had some cash reserves built up, so we bought a subdivision and started putting in roads. And that's not an area that we were familiar with, so that was a big mistake. The market didn't turn. We just screwed up, and the cost went through the roof, and we had to close down the subdivision. So that was very costly. It was more of a lesson. It wasn't nearly as costly or devastating as the 08 debacle. But yeah, that was a challenge. And I couldn't agree with you more, by the way, if I can just comment on that, because if there's a mentor, coach, teacher, anyone telling you that they haven't gone through something, they're full of baloney. It's a must. Unfortunately, you got to go through those bumps.
Yeah, I think any successful person that's ever come on this show, they always have 1, 2, or 3 stories of, the time where they just spiraled out of control, hit rock bottom, but they didn't give up. That's why they're on the show, is because they came back, and it actually caused them to have even more success. I've heard them say many times, if it wasn't for that event, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And I'm sure you could say the exact same thing.
I could. In fact, I was driving with my wife yesterday, and I said, I forget how it came up about the 2008, because it was 2 times in 26 and a half years. It was that one I just told you about, and then 08. She said, well, would you change it? Because I said I get asked that all the time. I said, no, I wouldn't change it. It's why we have the business today. It's what caused me to be different in the business I'm in now, and I would absolutely, unfortunately, if I had to do it again, I'd absolutely say I wouldn't repeat anything different. I would do that. I would not try to change it.
We all are, I think everybody listening is familiar with what happened in 2008, maybe not 91, depending on how old you are, but
right.
2008, I think we're all familiar with. Well, how long have you been doing the lease to own properties?
Beginning of 13, so we're going on 5.5 years now. Okay.
I want you just to walk us step by step through on how this process works. So, for 3.5 years, you've been kind of pivoting into the lease to own market. I want to say, what does it look like from an investor standpoint, starting in the very beginning?
Sure. So the way we do it, and I'm going to talk to kind of all 3 things we just talked about, the debacle, the changes we made, and what we're doing now in one fell swoop here, because a lease purchase is nothing more than, let's say you're a seller, and I'm going to put your home under contract with a lease purchase. It means what? It means I'm not putting any of my cash up front. I'm not signing on any bank loans. What I am doing is, if you have underlying debt, I'm going to make that payment after I find my buyer for your home. I'm also going to handle all your maintenance and upkeep. You have no responsibility as a seller because I'm passing that on to my buyer. At some date we agree on, usually 3 years or before, we're going to, with our buyer's financing, cash you out as the seller. And we're going to have the difference in the premium of the price that we marked up. We're also going to keep Every month we make a mortgage payment to your bank. We're going to keep the difference between that payment and what the buyer is paying us. These buyers, by the way, are all rent-to-own buyers we use.
Okay, so let's take a step back there. Let's say that I am in the home right now, okay? What does that look like? You're coming to me, correct?
We're coming to you. You could be coming to us from a marketing standpoint. We have more and more of that now. I want to clarify here that your question is good because it's not necessarily someone that's in trouble. You may be needing debt relief. You may be moving out of state. You may be upside down still in the market. You know that your house is worth less than you owe. Or you may be debt free. We deal with all of those different scenarios.
Okay. I mean, the reason why I'm asking is why wouldn't I want, I can understand some situations if you're upside down, but why wouldn't I want to just sell my house a traditional route?
Sure. The short answer is more money. That's why I said, even if you're debt free, some people say, well, why the heck would they do that? They could just sell it. Right. But they're going to pay more money. So the reason it's going to cost them more money, meaning the reason we can get them full price typically, if they're not asking some crazy number, is we also get the benefit of principal pay down while we're doing this deal. So you as a homeowner, you don't have a realtor commission, and I have nothing against realtors. I was one. You don't have, in some cases, even have to pay your transfer tax, which in most states, that's on the seller's side of the expenses. So more money is the short answer.
It sounds like it's a lot easier for the homeowner that wants to get out of their home. It's just they're transferring everything over to you, to your company.
Yeah. So there's only one person this doesn't work for, which must be triggered in the listener's mind, and that is if you, the homeowner, need or want your cash now, even if it was less, I'm not a fit. Every other scenario, I'm a fit because I can get them more money.
I call Chris Prefontaine up and I say, okay, look, I don't need money right now, but I do want to sell my house. I don't want to hassle with everything with the real estate agent and all that. I want to sell my house for the most money possible. So we make that connection. So what are the next steps? What are you doing for the seller then?
Sure. So in this case, my kids run all our own buying and selling now. My son-in-law, Zach's going to go out to the house. He's going to do a walkthrough. He's going to talk with you, if you're the seller, about how long you could wait for your money, because that will determine how much you get. The longer you can wait, the more you can get. And so it's a walkthrough, and then it's structuring a lease purchase agreement based on the conversation, i.e. terms. And that's really it. There's not a major, when we're doing lease purchase, there's usually not a home inspection. We can do our own walkthrough. It's very, very simple for the seller.
Okay. So then from that standpoint, once we make that agreement, that lease agreement, what are you taking over from the homeowner?
We would, if he or she has underlying debt, we're taking over that mortgage. And again, everything I'm saying assumes I want the property, right? So the numbers work. We're taking over the mortgage payments direct to the bank. We're paying the bank directly. And any and all maintenance and upkeep on that property, because our tenant buyer that we're placing in the home is going to have to take care of all the maintenance. We pass that responsibility on. Gotcha.
So I have this home. I say, this sounds good. I don't need my money right now, but I do need to move for whatever reason. So I sign over that agreement. I move out. Then you guys, as the investor, you're putting in a renter, correct?
It's a big distinction. It's a tenant buyer, because a renter is just that, and I don't want renters. Then you're going to have issues with eviction and all kinds of other headaches. What I want is a buyer who needs time for either credit enhancement or down payment. They would need to save up more, or they're self-employed. Plumber, electrician, anyone self-employed. They need time to season their credit with the bank or whatever it might be. I want someone that's responsible for a buyer, not a renter.
Then the buyer side, this is a benefit to them because they're not just renting now. They're getting to move into a house, not having to come up with the cash or, taking over the mortgage right away. They get time to live in it as their own home and then slowly over time buy it from you, correct?
Yeah, it is a huge advantage. They do have to come up with a down payment, because then that tells me they're a buyer and they have skin in the game. But what that allows them to do, very important, is the day they contract with us, they have locked in their price just like they were a homeowner, even though they can't get a loan yet. And that's huge, because, they go rent and then the market grows right past them maybe, and they're on this forever treadmill. This way they lock in and they behave, act like, and pay for that house as if they owned it until they get their own loan. And then that is also in their name, obviously.
Okay, I gotcha. And then what does the time frame look like for you actually owning the home to transferring ownership to the new person living in the home?
So the ownership on a lease purchase, meaning the deed, actually stays in the seller's name until such time my buyer gets their financing, and that time frame can be anywhere from 12 to 36 months. Real typical is 12 to 24.
Okay, so the home is actually staying in the name of the person that sold it and moved away, and then they're holding on to that for 24 months, and the new person that moved in is paying the mortgage and keeping the upkeep like they own the home, and then you're facilitating that.
Correct. 100% on the lease purchase deals. Yes, 100% the way you said it. And then in doing that simple process you just summarized, we actually create three full paydays for the investor on that one property.
Okay, so let's walk through those 3 full paydays then.
Sure. So first is what we just alluded to, whereby the tenant buyer has to come up with a down payment, so we know they're serious. That's payday number 1. Payday number 2 is when I said I'm going to make the mortgage payment and I'm going to collect from the tenant buyer, and there's a spread there, or I wouldn't be doing it. And let's say it's $300, $400, $500. That's payday number 2, but that's every month. Now you can count on that. That's passive income. And then the third payday is when it cashes out, because I obviously have a premium left on the price and I had principal pay down. So I have a nice payday 3. So if you think about this, you get to chart this thing out after doing 18 deals or so. You've got a nice cash flow stream, you've got cash now, and you've got great wealth building cash outs down the road.
So I'm just going to summarize this just for me. Payday number 1 happens on the initial transaction. Whatever the new buyer comes in and puts down, that's a payday for me if I'm the investor here.
Correct.
Then payday number 2, let's say that the monthly spread is $300 a month. I'm just throwing a random number out there. So there we got $3,600 a year in passive income, right? True passive income, because we have a serious buyer who wants to buy the house. We're not worried about him coming and going and trashing the place. So,
right.
And it's true passive income because he's taking care of the property, not me.
Correct.
Okay, so we're not really thinking about capital expenses at this point because that would be on the new buyer.
Correct.
Okay. Payday number 3 is the actual sell. So anticipating that the market is going up over those next 24 to 48 months, or I'm sorry, 12 to 24 months, or 12 to 36 months, whatever that spread is, that's payday number 3.
Correct. Yep. And obviously the market's not always going to go up, but I lock my price in day 1. I don't care what the market does. The buyer may care more than me, but I don't care what the market does because they have a locked-in price. I have a locked-in price. If the market does go up, great for them. They just gain like they were a homeowner.
Okay, I got it. So from day 1, if it's a 24-month agreement, you're locking in the price so you have that guaranteed spread coming. And if the market goes up, then the homeowner has some equity in the home. If the market goes down, they had a contract with you that they're still going to buy it what they agreed to from day 1.
Correct. They may need an extension or what have you, but yeah, that's their decision.
Yeah, so I can see it doing many of these at a time. You could definitely generate some passive income here.
Oh, yeah. Just with our family company, not counting students that we do deals with around the country, we carry around 50 or 60 of these at any one time. It's several million in cash outs.
50 or 60 at a time is what your family's carrying?
Yeah. In other words, between what's coming in and going out each month, like Monday, we have a closing on one. It's going, right? It's gone. Well, next week we'll probably get one too. So between what's coming and going, we carry around 50 or 60 waiting for cash out. What
part of the country are you guys doing this in?
We, as a company, as a family buying and selling entity, do this in Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. We have what we call associates, students around the country who we do deals with, and we're in about 18 or 20 different states with them.
On the student side, I'm really interested in this on the student side. Obviously, I'm not part of your family, so on the student side, if I were to get started with this, let's just say I'm in Arizona. Is Arizona one of your states?
Yeah, we have a great associate in Phoenix, actually, just outside of Phoenix.
Okay, so let's say I get in contact with this associate. What does it look like for me as a student? I mean, do I just contact you and find out, what are the next steps? What are the properties available? Are they listed on the MLS? Do I need a real estate agent? If I'm the investor, what am I looking at doing?
Okay, here's what you do. We have a really, really simple path, I'll call it, because I'm real blunt, I'm real logical, and I don't want people to go all different directions. We don't run around the country doing a bunch of seminars and previews and all these fancy things and selling things. Here's what we do. It's a simple 1 hour. If they can deal with listening to me for another hour, they go through a free webinar, and that tells them, look, I like this or I don't like it. And if they like it, they then can go through our home study course. Again, nobody's bugging them. They go at their own pace. If they like that, then they can apply. They can go off and do deals on their own now, or they can apply to be one of our associates and do deals with us. That's it. It's real simple. Okay,
I got you. So they could do this through you guys. They could do this on their own.
Yep.
You're teaching them how to go about doing this.
Exactly.
Let me just make sure I fully understand. This is actually this is really exciting me now because now I'm understanding more and more about it. So through whatever I learned from you, I find the leads, someone who's looking to sell their home, but is necessarily not needing the cash right up front, right? They can take it 24, 40, 36 months later, whatever. Okay, so that's part one. Then the other part is finding a buyer who doesn't have the means to purchase the house outright right now, but they need to to live in the house. They want to live in the house and they want to slowly purchase it maybe over the next 24 to 48 months.
100% correct. Yep.
Okay. So I facilitate that transaction from getting the person living in the home out. Do I do any kind of rehab or fixing up to this home, or is it as is?
No, it's as is. When you buy, they're nicer homes typically. So on occasion, we'll get one that has work. If we determine the numbers are good, we will pass that on to you, the buyer. If you're a handyman, I'll advertise it that way. So we do not typically, there's always exceptions, do work to any homes, especially because we don't own them.
True. Okay. What are you looking at as far as when you create the payment for the new homeowner coming in? Is this just the straight up mortgage payment, or what are you guys creating a contract where you're creating a payment for him that he's going to be comfortable with, or for her?
You're talking about the payment that the buyer's going to make?
Yes.
Okay, good question. So if, let's say market rent in this area in Phoenix is $1,500, and my payment for my outgoing with my seller's mortgage is, $1,200. I determined that spread is good enough. I can live with $300 a month. And so we're dictating their payment based on market rents and based on, meaning the market can handle it, and based on what their eventual mortgage might be close to, so that they're making a transition kind of logically saying, I'm paying a little bit more now as a rent-to-own buyer. I have incentive to go get my mortgage. So there's a little team effort here that we're all working for the same thing. Does that make sense?
Sure. So with that spread, who's picking up the taxes and the insurance?
Great question. So the insurance typically, with very few exceptions, as you probably know, is escrowed. So it's in my mortgage payment and stays in the owner's name because that follows the deed. The taxes are sometimes escrowed too, but if they're not, the rent-to-own buyer is going to pick those up, and we're going to price it accordingly so they can handle it. Okay,
I got you. So they're basically paying it just like they would, like they had the mortgage in the very beginning.
You said it. Yeah, I tell them at the buyer's meeting, and now my son Nick does, look, Chris, we're going to put you in this home, and you are acting as if, paying as if, behaving as if, meaning maintenance, you own the home.
Next question I have, Chris, is let's say you have a 24-month lease to buy option with them, or a lease to buy contract with them. Can they speed that up, or is it like, let's say they get approved for a loan in 12 months, or do they have to finish out those 24?
No, they can do it, and sometimes it does happen. We had one I wrote, this was like the beginning of 13, but they called me about 11 months later, like a 3 or 4 month deal I gave them, and they said, hey, good news, we're all set. Now, I would have had more principal pay down if it went longer, but the goal is to get these guys to the finish line, and they cashed it out. There's no penalty to cash out early.
Okay, perfect. And then what about an extension? You said you had that sometimes too, depending on what happens.
Well, yeah, let's just paint the picture. Everyone says to me, well, what if the market goes down? Okay, well, what if it goes down? Everybody's doing the same thing. So you might have to give them an extension of 6 months to save more, or they may opt not to buy it. I've never had that happen, but it's their option. They can do whatever they want. So sure, we structure your term as a buyer so that there's room left between my term of the seller and what I gave you in case you as the buyer do need more time. I have some wiggle room. I can give you 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever you need.
On the flip side of that is if, with that extension, you're still having, let's say in this scenario, that $300 a month spread, which is your passive income.
Correct. Plus some principal pay down, which on most loans runs anywhere from $200 to $1,500.
Sure.
A month in principal pay down. That's pretty cool.
Are you doing all of these on 30-year loans, 30-year fixed?
Well, it's whatever they have on the property when we call them. So there are some 15s that we've run into, but most of them are 30. And yeah, most of them are fixed because that's the norm out there. But we've got an associate now in D.C. who readily runs into sellers with 15-year mortgages. So their principal pay down's like $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 a month. Those are great deals.
Yeah, this is much better for the investor because, you're putting way more towards principal.
Oh, you're pounding it. Yeah, it's great.
So yeah, that takes me back just to reiterate that then when you're taking over that property from the seller who's moving out, you're taking over that mortgage.
Correct. We make the payment to the bank. We're not, very important distinction, we're not in any shape, form, or fashion assuming that, applying for a loan and assuming that. We are not on any of the loans personally in any way, all 50 or 60 of those properties I talked about.
So you just have a contract with the seller that you are going to continue to make these payments
Correct.
On their mortgage on their behalf.
Correct. That's part of the lease purchase standard agreement we use, and we obviously provide that for our associates. They don't have to recreate it.
Gotcha. And you're paying 100% of that, I'm assuming?
These are great questions because, yes, 99% of the time, but on occasion there's been, and I can think of two right away, that it's a big payment, but they still need it out. Like they left the state, I think, in one case, and they need it out. And so they subsidized it until the thing got cashed out. That's happened a couple times.
Hey guys, I just wanted to pause and take a second to say thank you from me to you for listening to and supporting the Money Peach podcast. Without listeners like you, this show definitely would not be possible, so thank you. The number one question that I receive is this: Peach, I just don't know where to start when it comes to my money. So many of us out there are living paycheck to paycheck. We have tons of debt. We're not making any headway. We can't save any money. We want to go on a freaking vacation where we pay cash for it. Oh, and let's talk about retirement savings and kids' college planning on top of that, right? Where do you start? Well, that's why we created the cash flow formula. The cash flow formula is the same system that Andrea and I used to pay off $52,000 in debt in only 7 months. And the best part is it's 100% free, meaning we are going to send you the free tools and a free lesson on how to set up your own cash flow formula. So to get started, go over to getcashflowformula.com. That's GET cashflowformula.com. Once again, head on over to getcashflowformula.com to get your free copy and your free lesson on how to get started the right way. All right, guys, now back to the show. One thing I like, Chris, about real estate is there's just so many different ways to generate income depending on your risk or what you like to do. If you're a fixer flipper type guy, if you're a buy and hold guy, if you want something like this. The thing I like about this is it seems like it's more of a win-win-win for everybody, because you have somebody that needs to get the heck out of their house for whatever reason, and you facilitate that. You have somebody that wants to get in a house but doesn't want to rent, they want to eventually own. And then you have the investor side where, it's like you said, you multiply this with multiple properties, there's a good chunk of change there for everyone.
Yeah, you said it. And it's funny because we just spoke with my son-in-law and myself, spoke with a gentleman that's doing some marketing for us. And he said, man, guys, he said, I've worked with some of the biggest names in real estate. And he named them all off and he showed us the books. He was on a Zoom video with us. He said, I've never heard, he had me on his podcast. He said, I've never heard of this. And I've studied real estate like inside and out. And you mentioned fix and flip and wholesale. Think about this. Those both, and I have some great friends that are doing it, so I'm not knocking it, but those both require what? They require you to do it again and again if you want to get paid. There's no residual there, number one. Number two, the margins are extremely tight. The checks are small, and it just doesn't interest me whatsoever for those two reasons.
And you have to come up with your own money. You have to have your own money to get started.
Well, yeah, I didn't even say that. You'd have to have your own money or go borrow or go beg from investors and private money. But, man, we know how to fix and flip. We've done them. We know how to wholesale. We've done them. It's good to know how to exit those if you run into the occasional one. It's just not our main model.
So as an investor standpoint, what kind of cash flow would they need to have coming in, or what kind of cash on hand would they have to have if they were to learn how to do what you're doing as far as, as the investor side?
Yeah. They just need to know. This will surprise you because this is a financial, geared show. And this is on my site, so I'm not saying anything new here. If you look at some of the top associates we have really doing some serious volume, then look at their overhead relative to what we create for profits. And I'll give you some hard numbers here. They're running like $450 to $750 a month in overhead. That's what it costs to run what I just explained, up to about 1 or 2 deals a month. Obviously, to scale past that, it's going to take more. But 1 or 2 deals a month, so the listeners can relate, listen to the numbers. Every deal on those 3 paydays, I didn't say this, creates, on average, for us, in DC, my student's even higher. He's over 6 figures per deal. We're at about 75 to 78 grand a deal, all 3 paydays combined. 75 to 78 grand a deal. So there's not a person listening, I hope, that wouldn't be happy with 1 or 2 deals a month, at least to start.
No, I don't think anybody's going to be complaining about that. So, Chris, let's walk through a deal then. I want to use real numbers here, and I'm going to go slow here so I'm going to write this down, and so I want all of our listeners to be able to follow along because I know they're at the gym or they're walking or they're on the train or whatever they're doing. So, let's go from start to finish. So, if you have a real world example, that would be even better.
I do. I'm going to be very round in my numbers because I didn't take anything out before the show, but I know enough of them in my head to be very close and round it off.
Yeah, let's round them off so we can do the math in our head.
Yeah, I'll paint the whole scenario. So this one I'm thinking of lower end, but I want to show you how cool lower end can be. On a lease purchase, one of my very first ones I did, where I did exactly what you and I just talked about. The home was on the market for around $189,900. It did not sell with a realtor. This woman was going out of state and got a divorce. So needless to say, she wanted out, and this would have been in 2013. Her mortgage payment was around $1,162, I remember. And market rate in that area is 15-ish a month from a buyer. So we put under agreement on a 3-year term, 36 months with her, contingent upon finding our buyer. We don't take over payments before we get a buyer in almost every case. We found a tenant buyer. The payment was exactly what I said, $1,500. It might have been up since then with taxes, but it's $1,500 to start. And then the price I put on the home was $225. By the way, the home's worth a little over $240 now, but it was $225 that we sold it on the rent to own for. Payday number one, and I'm real close on these. Again, I'm rounding, was around $15,000. So their down payment was $15,000. What I did not say when we went over payday one is more payday ones happen as we schedule future deposits for them to get their down payment up to help with their financing. So that particular one, every February from their tax refunds, paid another $5,000. So that total payday was around $25,000 payday one.
So back up real quick. I didn't quite follow that. I understand the down payment is $15,000, on this $225,000 home. But where did you said the $5,000 come from?
Yeah, so when we sit with you as a buyer, my son is very good at saying, look, what do you expect for tax refunds each year, or do you have a raise coming up? What we want to help them do on a 225 home, ideally, we want to get them to 10% over time so they look better for their loan, and they have more skin in the game. It increases our odds of getting this cashed out. So 15 came in at first, sure, but next 2 Februaries with your tax refund, we agree on $5,000 more coming to us as your deposit.
Gotcha, because the original down payment's only 6%, 6.5%.
Yeah, whatever that is, yeah. So we want to try to get that up over time, and they all get that. It's going to put them in a better spot.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we talked about payday one. Now let's talk about payday two.
Payday two on the 3-year term would be that $300, just shy of $400 actually, because it was $1,162 I'm paying out and $1,500 I'm taking in. So whatever that comes to.
$338 times 36 months, because you're taking that for 36 months, right?
Yep. So what do you got, 10?
Just over 12,000.
Okay. So that's payday two. And then payday three is pretty cool because now let's go to the exact numbers. I didn't tell you what she owed. So she was on the market for $189. She owed around $167 at the time. Principal pay down on that was around, I'm going to use round numbers, $300. It was 3 and change. So easy math, same as you just did on the spread, right? We're getting principal pay down of 12 and change. Okay? So now that mortgage, I know what it's down to. It was down to 140 something. I think it was in mid 140s, like 145. Well, we sold it for 225. So whatever that comes to, it's a big payday for a small house, and it was the first one we ever did.
So 225 is what you owed.
225 is what they owed us, less their deposit though. Remember, they put in 15, 5, and 5.
Okay, so 225 minus 15, and then the spread on that from 145, correct?
Well, they paid in 15, 5, and 5. So they're going to take 25 off of that. They owe 200 now. Okay,
so 200. So you made about 55,000 on the sell.
Correct. So you add that to the other ones. I don't know what that comes to, but I bet you it's right around the average, and the numbers are always right around our average.
I'm doing it right now. So you're looking. This is the $92,000 deal.
There you go. And the gentleman in D.C. that I talked about, every one of his are over 6 figures.
Wow. So here's what we did here. They found this property, and stop me if I'm wrong here, but they find this property, and she had it listed for $190,000, couldn't get out of it, was going through a divorce, just wanted to get out. Chris comes along and says, okay, here's what we can do is we'll take over your payments for you. He looked, the payments were $1,162, is what her mortgage payment was. He's going to take over those payments for her. He's going to get the new lease to own buyer that's going to come in at $1,500 a month, which is a $338 passive income a monthly over 36 months. And that comes out to about $12,000. That was actually payday number 2. Payday number 1, I didn't talk about here, was the $15,000 down deposit from the new buyer to show that they have some skin in the game, but also to get them to 10% for that conventional loan. It was the extra $5,000, and was it twice in those 36 months?
Yeah, twice. Yep.
Okay. So when they get the tax refund, $5,000, that way they're close to that 10%. Actually, that would put them right over the 10%, so they could, have a better chance of purchasing that home in a traditional loan down the road. So that was actually payday number 1. Payday number 2 was the $338 a month for 3 years, which comes out to be a little over $12,000. And then payday number 3 was the actual sell of the home, where it leaves the original owner who moved away, that got the divorce, and it goes to the new buyer. The purchase price, the agreement that they set up from day one when the new buyer moved in was $225,000. However, they paid down $300 a month in principal, correct?
Yep.
For the last 3 years, right? So that's about right around $11,000. and then minus the $25,000 they had put down, $15,000 down payment plus the tax refunds. So $200,000 minus the $145 was the new balance on the house. That's $55,000. So you add up those three numbers, you're at $92,000.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll make this interesting for your listeners. That deal took a few other twists that we would need 2 hours for, and we pulled a lot more money out of it again. And I call those payday 4s and 5s. But I'm happy to share that with them, and I'm also happy to send them at my cost for shipping one of my books as well. They just say they were on your show.
Okay, how do we do that? Before I forget, how do we make that happen?
Just email me, Chris, CHRIS, at smartrealestatecoach.com. Just mention you or your show, and if they want to know more about that deal, I'll share it with them, and I'll also send them our Amazon bestseller, Real Estate on Your Terms.
I appreciate that, Chris. And if you don't have a pen and paper, don't worry. We're going to put all of this information in the show notes at the end of the show. So just head on over to moneypeach.com/session106, and we'll have everything that Chris and I talked about. And we'll even put an example of what we just talked about in the show notes. That way you guys can actually visualize this, because this is pretty cool stuff. I mean, this is really, really cool stuff. So I know you said that you had a student in the DC area doing, over 6 figures, but that sounds like he's a very, very good student. What is what is your average?
The average paydays is closer to what we experience here in New England, 75-ish. Also, that gentleman I mentioned is full-time. He's the only associate we have currently in all the states we work in that's full-time. Most people are working their way out of a corporate environment and looking for a plan B full-time. And others are, hey, I'm quite comfortable with what I got going on for a job, or I have a nice 401k and I want this for supplemental. Great. So most people don't have the time he has. So on average, a part-timer like Mike and Cal can go ahead and pluck away at 1 deal a month. I mean, you can do that very, very part-time. He works 12-hour days, 6 days a week, and he's doing this part-time and enjoying 1 deal a month.
Very cool. So I'm excited for this, Chris. I know a lot of our listeners are probably thinking this is more up my alley when it comes to real estate or when it comes to investing in general. So what is the best possible way that we can get in contact with you? Where do we go first?
Well, the book and the email are obviously fine, but if they want to go watch that webinar that I mentioned, they just go over to smartrealestatecoach.com, and it'll be all over the place. You can just register. It's free. And if you don't mind listening to me for another 60 minutes, it's free. And that'll let you dip your toe in the water and say, do I want to learn more or not? And it'll coach you right through it. And then, like you, we have a podcast. It's smartrealestatecoachpodcast.com.
Okay, so we'll have links in our show notes to everything we just talked about there, to the webinar, to the Smart Real Estate Coach, to contact information for Chris. You guys can get the book sent over. Just put in the subject line, Money Peach Podcast, and he'll know to send that to you at no charge. Chris, on a side note, one thing that I really like about your business model is I like the family aspect of it. So when I was doing my research on, trying to find out as much as I could about you before we did this show, I noticed right away that a lot of the last names matched up on your about page. And then I started reading that, this is a family business. To me, that just, for some reason, I feel it's wholesome in a way. I think it's, you guys are all working together. But one thing I wanted you to share, I've heard it on a different podcast you were on, but maybe just share the story of why your family is involved in this, and a little background on you and your son and how that all comes together.
Well, a few things. Our kids obviously grew up in real estate. My son-in-law did not, but by default he did, right? But early on the kids did. And when Nick was in, 7th grade or so, he had a snowboard accident. He was in a coma. The doctors actually told him he'd never walk, talk, or eat again. Told us he would never. So when he got out quite successfully out of that, and you'd never know the difference if you met him today, so everything's great. But when he got out of that whole challenge, he decided he's not going to go to college. So literally, I created a curriculum between real estate and personal development and mentors and coaches that I had accessed over the years, and put him through that. So he was the first one to, he went and got his realtor's license, and then he was the first one to join me in 2014. And then in, January of 16, Kayla and Zach both joined the business, and now, everybody's full-time at it.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I remember listening to you on another podcast. You were sharing the story about, your son, snowboard accident, in a coma, and, you're told by the doctors the absolute worst news, right? It's never going to be the same. And now it's cool seeing, I'm on your website right now, and, just seeing he's in the mix. He's part of, helping other people get to that next level of, creating real passive income through real estate. So I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah, and if they want to see the story, it's an older video. It's 2003-ish. But if they go on to YouTube and just type in his name, Nick Prefontaine, at the time my brother was alive. He was a writer. He's passed now, but he encouraged me to film that and then to write the story. And so there's a 5-minute video on YouTube that I'm sure they'll enjoy, especially if they have kids.
Very cool. Yeah, we'll put links to the YouTube channel or the YouTube video in our show notes as well.
Oh, cool.
Hey, Chris, we are running out of time. I have two last questions I want to ask you. I ask every guest that comes on the show. First one is, if you could recommend one book, just one book to anybody, which book would that be and why?
Well, that changes every week, right? Because I'm in a different mindset and my business is. But right this second, I would say The Hard Things About the Hard Things. And here's why. He goes through not only what he went through in building a business, but gives you solutions. So they're not theory. It's not textbook. It's not, a Harvard business book. It's here's what I did, here's what I learned, and here's how to do it if you're going to go this route. So The Hard Things About the Hard Things.
And who's that by?
I think it's Ben Horowitz.
Yep, it is. I'm looking it up right now. Ben Horowitz. So we'll have links in the show notes to that. Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And that has actually been mentioned once or twice before on the show. So
Oh, really?
Yeah, very ironic that you mentioned that. Last question I have for you before we sign off here is, if I were to look at your phone, what do you have as the image on your home screen?
My home screen is actually my grandson. It has been since November. He was born in November.
Oh, congratulations. Very cool. All right, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that I'm excited. I'm going to probably, after we hang up here, I have a few more questions I have for you to get started, but I'm excited for our listeners to explore what their options are here. And I appreciate you guys putting together that free webinar. I encourage you guys, if you're just thinking about it, instead of watching 1 hour of television or fiddling around on social media for an hour, you might as well watch this webinar for an hour and learn something. You're either going to learn this is great, or you're going to learn this is not for me, but you're going to learn something. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Chris.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was fun.
And just like that, we wrap up another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. All the show notes, the links, the free book, the free webinar, everything that Chris and I talked about can be found over at moneypeach.com/session106. That's moneypeach.com/session106. Special thanks goes out to my producer, Steve Stewart, and my assistant, Kayla Sloan. As you know, this show would not be possible without their help. And lastly, just want to say thank you so much for listening and supporting the show. Have a great week, and God bless you. Boom, 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 boom.